Welcome to the She's Far From Home podcast. I'm your host, Katie, and we're here to share the stories of bold women who've packed their bags and built new lives abroad. From navigating culture shock to finding community and creating adventures far from home, these incredible women show us that the world really is ours to explore. So grab your passport and join us for some fun, laughter, and a whole lot of inspiration, because life's an adventure when you're far from home. Welcome to the She's Far From Home podcast. I'm your host, Katie, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. Everyone, this is Nathalie. Hi, Nathalie.
Hi, Katie.
Thank you for joining me today. So Nathalie is currently living here in KL in Malaysia, but has actually lived in around 10 countries around the world and has some incredible insights to share on what it's like to live around the world and be a global citizen. So Nathalie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you also very, very much for inviting me, and I think this is such an important topic, and I'm very glad I can participate in the podcast.
Thank you. So I think, first of all, maybe just give us a little background information. How long have you been in Malaysia?
I have lived in Malaysia for 2 years now.
2 years. Before Malaysia?
Before Malaysia, I was in San Lucia.
Wow.
Yes,
okay, in the Caribbean.
Yeah, and before that in Australia,
yeah,
Chile, and Fiji, and other countries, and Africa as well.
And Africa, where in Africa?
In Kenya.
Africa, Chile, St. Lucia, Kenya, Australia, Malaysia, and you're from originally?
From Ecuador, yes.
Ecuador?
Yeah.
Wow, what an incredible kaleidoscope of countries that you've lived in.
I also live in the UK and the US.
Oh, okay.
I forget
not
that.
as glamorous, maybe.
Okay.
UK.
Big difference.
UK and America, maybe not as glamorous. Would you say, you've obviously lived in so many countries overseas, right? Do you have a favorite? Let's start there.
I do.
Okay.
I mean, I would say Fiji and St. Lucia. They are islands. I mean, very small, and you know, there's something called the island syndrome that you get tired of because it's such a small place. But it's very beautiful to live in these places because the people are very nice as well. I mean, the environment, you have beautiful beaches. So I think Fiji and St. Lucia are the top 10.
Wow. Okay. Well, my best friend is from Fiji, and I'm hoping to visit very soon. So that's good to hear.
Yeah.
What was it about Fiji and St. Lucia that you loved? It was the beaches. It was the island life.
I mean, I will start with Fiji because they're very different places. I mean, you think that all islands are similar, but they're not. Fiji has a very special culture because it's very isolated, but also the culture itself, you know, where they come from, is beautiful. It's very, I mean, I want to say exotic, but also very deep in the family values, the spiritual values, and the people are lovely.
How long were you in Fiji?
I lived there I work in Fiji for 10 years, going in and out.
Wow.
But we lived there 6 months with my family.
Yeah, and what about St. Lucia?
We were there for a little bit more than a year also.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, where was your least favorite place that you lived?
Bangladesh.
Bangladesh, okay.
Sorry, Bangladesh, lovely people, but it's very challenging, the traffic and infrastructure.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot, you know, again, very nice people, but logistically it was hard to, like, the traffic is crazy.
Yeah, okay. How do you feel now when you think about your identity? Because obviously you're from Ecuador, but you've lived in so many places around the world. How does that affect your personal identity? Do you still feel Ecuadorian?
I do.
Okay.
I mean, it's a very important question because this is what I'm going through right now.
Wow,
because
okay.
I have a daughter now, you know, as they grow up, they develop their own preferences. And I really doubt that we'll ever go back and live in Ecuador.
Okay.
We lived there when she was little, and also we spent some time. But I think I'm 100% Latin or Ecuadorian, that's what I identify with. But at the same time, it's kind of hard to think that I'll never live there again.
Yeah.
So I think the identity is Ecuadorian, but I try to make the most of every place that I go to.
Sure. Do you feel that you pick up different parts of each culture that you live in?
I think it was easier in Latin America because it's more homogeneous, or, you know, in the US, also you feel more Latin, you know, like Latin things. But it was, in Australia, it was harder to pick up things. Because the culture is very different.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I pick it up, but I try to make the most of it when I'm in the country. enjoy the good things about it.
Yeah. When you move to a different country, do you have like a system of getting your new life set up? Because I guess like the first time you move, it's kind of a bit like haphazard. Yeah. But then when you move so frequently, have you developed a system?
Yes. I mean, it's still hard. People said, oh, it's so exciting to live in so many countries. But as you move more, it gets a bit tiring. But I think one of the things is like I try to be very organized, always, like not to try to accumulate things because it's very hard to move with a lot of things.
True, yeah.
I always contact people either in Facebook or through friends that are in that country where I'm going to move to. So it's easier to ask questions, like they ask about the car, the housing, the moving. So yes, I think over time you develop the experience of moving to several places.
Yeah. What do you think for you personally has been the most rewarding part about living in so many different countries?
Actually, when I think about my life, sometimes I'm nostalgic about Ecuador, but then I realize that I've been fortunate to get to know the cultures and the world in other places, because you learn a lot by being in other places. I mean, your mindset changes, you learn the culture, the pros and the cons, every place, but I've been fortunate to be able to experience all the different cultures in so many places.
Since you've been in Malaysia for 2 years, is there any aspect of the Malaysian culture that you've embraced?
I really like Malaysia. I mean, every person that has lived here loves Malaysia.
Agree.
Because it's such a friendly place, it's safe. I would say people in Malaysia are more laid back, and I really embrace that because, coming from the Western world, like the US or Australia, you're always on the run. But here, people are more calm. I mean, of course, sometimes it can be frustrating. They take time to do things, but then you also learn to slow down. I really appreciate that about Malaysia.
Yeah, I think Malaysian people are very warm and welcoming, and very humble.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What do you think has been the most challenging part about your moving around, and living in so many different countries?
Well, there are two things. First, the logistics, because it's not always as smooth. I mean, just trying to think that I moved from Australia to San Lucia. It was hard. And then, because now I have a daughter, that's the most challenging thing. She wanted to keep her toys, and it's hard to ship so many things and expensive. So some moves have been more smooth and some others have been challenges because now I try not to accumulate things. But I would say the logistics are always difficult, and especially if you have a pet. I mean, I had to leave. I have a cat in every country.
So you've moved your cat with you?
No, we left them, which was heartbreaking.
Oh my goodness! Yes. Yeah, I can imagine.
We have like 5 cats around the world.
Oh,
it was heartbreaking, especially for my daughter. But I couldn't take the cat because of logistics and expenses. Yeah. But I think that's challenging, and also my daughter doesn't enjoy moving so much now that she's growing. When she's
making friends.
Yes, she's 10. Yes, when she was 2, 3. Up to 6, 7 years old, she was fine. But of course, now that she's going into adolescence, it's becoming more challenging.
Yeah. So how do you navigate with your daughter, the moving? Like, how do you kind of help her to adjust and sort of navigate that move?
I think it's important that you find a lot of activities. I mean, Malaysia is great for families. It's very child-friendly. You have lots of things to do with children, theme parks, these parks even in you have indoor parks also in Kuala Lumpur. So I think you have to find a lot of activities for her. I also kept her in touch with her friends.
Okay.
Through social media, yes, through WhatsApp. She's in touch with her friends. I always talk to her about the importance of being able. She's very privileged to be able to live in so many countries, and when she grows up, she'll be able to, take advantage of this. But I think, we're getting there every time we move.
You think it gets easier each time? Or is it getting harder?
I don't know yet. I mean, the last move was hard, but I think when she's an adolescent, when she's like 12 or 14, it might be harder. But
where were you before Malaysia?
In San Lucia.
San Lucia before you came here. Wow. Yeah. So that's a huge difference. You've gone from like island life with palm trees and beaches to inner city kind of skyscrapers and towers and
traffic.
How did you find that adjustment?
I mean, it was harder for me than for my daughter. and my husband, because my husband is very happy with his work.
Okay.
He works for the IFRC, which is the Red Cross.
Yeah.
And my daughter's school is great. It's an international school, so with lots of activities, really good teachers. So I think she was able to adjust because it's a very good school. I was the one missing the beach.
Yeah, I can imagine.
and the food.
Yeah, missing. I would be the same. I would be totally missing the beach as well. I'm a beach person at heart as well. I've always lived near or close to the beach, and so KL for me, that's the only challenging part about KL really is the lack of beach.
Yes,
really
close by. Yes.
Yeah. When you think about home now, is there a place that feels like home, or do you think home is more of a feeling?
I have to say both, because it's incredible. Every time I go to Ecuador, I feel at home, because 100%, is where I grew up.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of memories, a lot of friends. It's very easy for me to move, because whatever I need, it's easier to get a contact, or know where to go. Now, another place that feels home is Washington, D.C., because I lived there for 15 years. And also I have that feeling. In Australia as well, because I lived there around 10 years, but here I also feel at home.
Okay.
I think it's important that you make your home homey, with certain things that make you feel like it's your home. Like
comfort.
Yes, exactly. And for my daughter as well, it's very important that her bedroom, her space, she feels like it's her place. So I think you can kind of move home, and you have to make it homey when you're going to spend some time. So you feel to some extent that you belong there.
Yeah. When you know that you have to leave one country and move to another, how do you prepare yourself emotionally for that move?
I think you have to, emotionally is harder, but I think you have to be very strong logistically and really make a plan. I don't think you can leave things for the last minute, because then it can be very chaotic. So I really try to organize as smoothly as possible the move.
Do you have spreadsheets?
Yes, I do. Even when I travel, because I always forget the charger, the toothbrush. Yeah, but I think it's important to have the system, like you said, but logistically it can be challenging, but you have to be organized, but emotionally it's hard.
How do you prepare yourself? You also are having to say, you've spent time to build a life in a country, find a community, make friends, and then you're uprooting and you're moving, you're saying goodbye again, and is that hard?
It is very hard, but you see what is interesting what happened to me in Malaysia is that I met a lot of women that are in my same situation. They move like diplomats or people in international organizations. They move every 4 years, and we share the same stories.
Okay.
So that's why this podcast was very important for me, because I think it's good to put it out there that we have similar situations, and it's our life with the advantages and disadvantages. So it is heartbreaking, and every time somebody's going, there's a farewell. But it's important to stay connected, but also to, as soon as you arrive to the new place, start getting connections.
So how do you do that? So you move to a new place, right? Your daughter's in school, your husband's working, and you're at home. How do you now go about creating and finding a community for yourself?
Through associations. There's a lot of, now because of social media, which is a good thing, you do find, for example, here there's a lot of expats organizations. You have the Latin American Ladies Association. For example, if you like to dance or yoga, you can find your place.
Yes.
Through the school, through the school system, you can also find things. But
parents?
Yes.
Do you meet other parents through your daughter's school?
Exactly. And I always join, not as much as I would like, because it can be tiring. I try to volunteer in the school to get to know other moms. But it has been very helpful to meet the Latin Americans, because we are very close to our culture, to see how they also adjusted to live in another country.
Is there a Latin community here in KL?
Yes.
Have you connected with other Latino people?
It's very strong. One good thing about Latin America is that we all speak the same language, except for Brazil and other countries, small countries, but we speak Spanish. The culture is similar, so we are able to connect. They have an association, but also through the school they have the ISQL Spanish-speaking moms.
Okay.
And Yeah, we get together, do activities, so that's been very helpful.
I guess in a city like KL, it's quite easy because it's kind of, a very sort of lots and lots of people coming in and out and living here. But what about on a smaller island, like if you're in Fiji or St. Lucia or in Kenya? I mean, it's probably, would you say it's harder to make a community in those kinds of places?
I found an Ecuadorian in Fiji.
Really?
It was amazing.
You found an Ecuadorian in Fiji.
Yeah, it was so funny. And then they did have the Latins in Fiji. They used to get together on Friday nights.
Yeah.
To have pizza.
Wow.
That was amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but in San Lucia, you also had a lot of Venezuelans.
Okay.
I mean, it's not that far from Latin America. You have, from Dominican Republic, but I would say it's not that hard to find Latin Americans because it is a big,
geographically, it's
exactly.
quite big, yeah.
So I always find, but also, I mean, having said that, I became very good friends with the San Lucian in Fiji, with Fijians, because the culture is kind of similar to Latin American in terms of the family, the values. So I think it's not only the Latins, but I have been able to find in other, from other countries, friends.
Have you managed to make friends with like local Malaysians living here in KL?
No, because that's the challenge. I mean, I think it's kind of sad that we live in a bubble. I live in KLCC, which is the center, and there's a lot of expats, and the school where my daughter goes is international school, and there's a lot of people from everywhere, but I find it, and I would like to do that, meet more Malaysians, but I think it's been challenging, but I'm working on that. I want to get to know more the people, the culture, the real thing.
To really understand more the Malaysian culture, right?
Yes.
Have you participated in any of kind of the Malaysian like cultural celebrations, religious celebrations? Because like Malaysia is so diverse, right? With Chinese New Year and Thai Pusam and Hari Raya, and so there's a lot going on always, right?
Yes.
Do you kind of integrate when those kinds of celebrations are happening?
I mean, from the outside, because in the school, obviously they celebrate that, and I love the Chinese New Year. Is beautiful. I go to all the performances of the lion dance, but they do a lot of celebrations, but I participate more from the outside.
Okay.
I mean, we go to the celebrations, but I haven't been able to be a part of the community, local community.
Interesting, because I have found very little in the way of expat community in KL. I think I found more of an expat community in Penang. But I would say that my friendship group in KL is definitely more of from local Malaysians.
Great,
yeah, which for me has been like a beautiful thing.
Yes.
And I think also it helps because I'm working, and in my job I'm just working with Malaysian people predominantly. So I think that helps for me. But I've met very, very few kind of expats here in KL. Like I know maybe one or two other British people, but I assumed that when I moved to KL I would meet loads of British people.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen.
It depends what you're doing, because in San Lucia and in Fiji I met a lot of Fijians, I met a lot of San Lucians because I was working.
I think that's the difference.
I think that's the difference, because my husband and other people that I know, they do know more Malaysians. But through the school, and it's harder. But I want to work on that. Maybe you can introduce me to your friends.
I know that you said your least favorite country was Bangladesh, but was there any particular country that you've lived in where you felt really disconnected, where you felt lonely, or
Australia? Yes,
you felt a sense of disconnect in Australia.
I mean, Australia is a beautiful country.
I'm going to Australia in a month. For the first time.
We can talk about that. No, I mean, it's a beautiful country. There's nothing wrong with Australia, but I was recently married when I moved to Australia, and it was hard because I didn't have any children, so I didn't have any way to connect. And I live in Canberra, which is the small city, it's the capital. So I felt disconnected because there's not a lot of Latin America is too far away, and they are more connected to the British, I think, even not even Americans. Australians is a very different place, very isolated. The time difference, so that's when I felt very challenging to adapt. I mean, I had to after 8 or 10 years, but that was the more challenging for me, Australia.
How long were you in Australia?
8 to 10 years. I can remember.
Wow.
It's a long time.
So you felt disconnected. What did you do to try and combat that whilst you were there?
Again, the way I do it, I mean, when I'm working, I think it's when I'm working that's the problem because you have more free time. But I always try to engage in activities. I mean, I was doing African dance, I performed in the theater, I was doing drums. I mean, also I was helping a friend who was teaching Spanish. You always have to engage. Try to do as many things as you can.
Put yourself out into the community.
Correct.
I think the community is not going to find you. You have to find them.
That's true.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. How do you stay connected to your Ecuadorian roots? Do you have any cultural practices, rituals, anything that you do that helps you to stay connected to your Ecuadorian roots?
The difficult thing was when somebody asked my daughter, because we live in Australia and she was very young when we were in Australia, somebody asked her, where are you from? And she said, Australia. And I said, no, you are Latin. And she says, no, I'm not. And then I was like, you are Latin. And she's like, no, I'm not. And then
so your daughter doesn't identify as...
Now she does.
Okay.
I had to work on that because I didn't realize how you kind of tend to lose your like
identity.
You said, yes, and the culture. And then what I'm doing now, I mean, we went to spend a lot of time in Ecuador for one thing, I mean, to spend time with family. But then now I try to, I mean, one aspect is the cooking, but also to watch some movies or be in touch with the family. I mean, my mom is Mexican, so that's kind of easier now that I'm engaged with the Mexican a dance group, and also the traditions is more rich Mexico than Ecuador in terms of traditions. I'm also acquiring the Mexican traditions to make it more Latin for her.
So how did you help your daughter to regain some of her Ecuadorian identity?
Well, I think it's in the blood because she has a very strong temperament. Somebody
the fiery Latin.
Yes, she's there 100%. I cannot say that she. I know other people that they were born in Latin America, but they live abroad. I don't think she's going to be a Latin 100% like I am. I feel 100% Latin. I think she's going to be 25% because she lives in Malaysia. I mean, most of her classmates, I mean, there are very few. She doesn't have any Spanish-speaking classmates. There are some Latins that she knows, but most of her best friend is from China.
But isn't that going to be so amazing for her as she gets older? I think as she gets older and, she has a wider understanding of what it means to have friends from all over the world. I mean, she'll probably get to travel to China to see her friends. And that just living here and having those friends from all over the world will open so many other experiences for her.
100%, because again, it was very challenging for me when we moved to Malaysia because she was 8 years old and she was missing her best friend. And when I talk to other mothers, that's the importance of creating a community. They've been through the same thing. And they tell you when they are older, they really appreciate all the good things about really moving a lot and knowing to get the world and the cultures. Do you know about the third culture kids?
Third culture kids,
yes. It's a concept I came across very recently, which means that you are growing up in a country where neither your father or your mother is from
that culture.
So that's my daughter, and there are a lot of books, a lot of resources, and entire community about their work, third culture kids. So I think it's also important to read those books, get information on how you really navigate these challenges, because a lot of people, I mean, in the case of my daughter, Peruvian father, Ecuadorian mom, but in other cases you really have a Scottish father, a mother from India, a really mix, and there are more different cultures. And I think it happens to so many people, but it's important to get out there and get the information to apply for your own case.
Are there any books you can recommend?
I mean, they're called third culture. What did I say? Third culture kids.
Third culture kids.
They are called like that, and there are plenty of them. Very good ones.
I guess trying to help your daughter is now one of your biggest missions,
Number one. Yes, because as an adult, it's very interesting, and then you are responsible for shaping, this person. As an adult, of course, you learn to coping mechanisms, but that's what I do with her. I teach her, how to relax. I mean, meditation, how to cope. I mean, we work a lot of what I would call the soft skills, because the hard skills, I always argue with my husband, they're going to be there. math, science. He's really into sports.
Yeah, of course. She's going to learn all that at school.
Into that. But for me, it's very important to learn to adapt, to have empathy, to relationships. So I always instill that on her.
Amazing. It sounds like you're working really hard on making sure that she stays connected to her Ecuadorian roots, but that she also embraces, the experiences that she's having now and will have. How long do you think you'll be staying in Malaysia?
I mean, I hope a long time because this is a very easy country for families. It's safe. You have everything here. I mean, family friendly. You feel comfortable. It depends on my husband's work, but I hope we don't go too far from here.
So I guess you have friends literally from all over the world now, right?
Yes.
How do you maintain those friendships?
Facebook. I have a love-hate relationship with Facebook.
Agree.
Now I learned, that you don't have to be too expose yourself out there too much. I put very minimal information. But at the end of the day, I mean, when I go somewhere, I put it in Facebook. Like when we go to Europe or when we go somewhere new, I said, oh, do you know any? And I did this a lot before. Facebook was different 10 years ago, where I was able to contact so many people out there. And I think through Facebook, I maintain my relationships. Like I said, not close, because it's very hard to do that also. But I mean, to keep in touch, to know what's going on. So Facebook is the one I mainly use.
And what about your family back in Ecuador and Mexico? Your mum's in Mexico?
No, my mom is in Ecuador, but we have family in Texas.
Okay.
But my family is mainly in Miami and Ecuador. But we have WhatsApp groups.
Of course. I mean,
phone calls.
You've obviously been living abroad for like a number of years. I remember when I first moved abroad 20 years ago, we didn't have WhatsApp, we didn't have FaceTime. It was basically you would update a status on Facebook. Like it's so much easier now, I think, for people to stay connected.
Yes, I mean, it's just a phone call away. I mean, I call my mom all the time or my family. Also I try to make sure that my daughter is close to her cousins. So we do a lot of that, we do phone calls and the happy birthdays, We definitely do that.
So given all of the countries that you've already lived in, is there a country that you haven't lived in that you would like to? Do you have like a wish list?
Yeah, I do. I mean, number one is Portugal.
Nice.
Yeah, because a friend of mine was the one that put the idea in my mind that she wanted to move to Portugal, and as you know, a lot of people want to move there. But when we visited Portugal, it's Europe, but I said calmer. Because when you go to Paris or Rome, I mean, Madrid, the big city, London, the big cities is a bit crazy. But Portugal is a good mix of Europe, European culture, and more calm, and a little bit more closer to Latin America, like, to some extent.
I guess the language, it's Portuguese, right?
But it's more the culture. The language is not so easy to understand, but the culture, it can be a bit similar,
So Portugal would be on your...
Number one
on your list.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. It's a beautiful country. I mean, I think it became more noticeable a few years ago.
I think because of social media, I've definitely seen a lot more of Portugal online, like all the influencers are traveling there.
And it's beautiful. I mean,
exactly.
So many amazing places to visit in Portugal.
Whilst you're here living in KL, have you taken the opportunity to travel and explore more of Southeast Asia?
Yes, and it's interesting because everyone thinks like Africa is one country, and I always said you cannot compare Mozambique to Rwanda, to Senegal, to Kenya. I mean, first of all, the language, the culture. I mean, every country is so different. Now I get to know Africa a lot because I work there in many countries. But South Asia, it's also, East Asia and South Asia, they are very different countries. Like if you go to, we've been to Thailand. I've been to Nepal, to Sri Lanka.
Amazing.
And I still want to go to Vietnam, Cambodia.
I was in Cambodia last week.
Totally different than Malaysia or Singapore.
You cannot
compare Singapore or Japan. You cannot compare to anything. So every country is unique.
How was it living in Africa? Kenya, you said, right?
Yes. I met. It was like 20 years ago or so.
Okay.
But I met there my husband. But I said that it was. It changed my life in many many ways, but I went there because I wanted to. I work with the orphans with the HIV. It was a program with UNICEF, and I was coming from Washington D.C. with this idealistic mentality. My husband always used to make fun of me because I wanted to change the world, and then of course the world changes you. But it was very. I think you have to do it when you're young. I think now it will be more difficult to go there because I have a daughter. It was a beautiful experience, but very challenging because then you're confronted. I always, when people talk about the things they want to do in life, like the unfairness of so many things, I said, but to go there and confront them is another issue.
Yeah, of course.
And then you realize what you can do and what you cannot do. And there are always limits, and there are the politics and so many things. So I learned a lot. I mean, it was an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And a beautiful country as well. And the safaris.
I've never done a Kenyan safari.
You have to do a safari in your life. I always tell people when you are there in the middle of the savannah, it's an amazing experience.
Yeah, incredible. If you had to give somebody advice, let's say somebody's planning to move to a new country, maybe it's their first time, what advice would you give someone that is wanting to move to a new country?
I mean, do your homework, do research, because now that I've been exploring about Portugal, I am in the expats groups of Portugal, and they ask a lot of questions, but it depends where you're moving. I mean, if you already have a job, it's much easier. But do your homework in terms of the neighborhoods, where you want to live, the schools, if you have children, life expenses, healthcare. I think always do your research and try to talk. I mean, there's a lot of, in Facebook or other networks, there's also a lot of expat communities. Ask the questions, but also if you Google things, it's amazing. You can leave living expenses you can Google it and you'll find some information. So do your homework before you move.
Do your homework.
100%, yes,
Yeah,
that helps.
Any other pieces of advice?
To connect to people, like I connected to, when I came to Malaysia, a friend of mine that lived here 10 years ago connected me with a lady that was so helpful, and she put me in touch with so many things. So, I mean, connect to people or join these expat communities. They are very helpful.
Yeah. Okay, great advice. I would honestly agree with everything that you said. It's about connecting to people, connecting to the local expat or the local people, and doing your research for sure. Because and do you find that it gets easier moving or saying goodbye?
No. I mean, it comes normal in a way that sometimes in life is like when you're a doctor. I've been watching some Netflix series on about doctors, and like this poor young guy was devastated because the patient died. But then when you're older, they told him, the patient dies is part of the job. So I think we become a little bit like used to it. But it doesn't become easy. I mean, it becomes more normal, but it's not so much easier because you still have I mean, for me, it's difficult to leave friends. I mean, I think the emotional part is more difficult to manage than the logistics. But you have to, I mean, like with anything in life, you have to learn how to, coping mechanisms or how to...
What would be your coping mechanisms?
I mean, I learned to take time. Because for me, it was hard to make friends when I came to Malaysia. I mean, I admit it because I was burnt out, I was tired because of moving so many things, COVID, we were doing a lot of work. I was exhausted, so it took me time. It took me more than a year to get my community around. So I learned to be patient, I learned self-care. People don't talk about self-care, and I said, this is my time to rest. I was not working. I was, just enjoying massages, here.
You have to. When you're in Southeast Asia, massages.
100%, and so affordable. So I said, just take it easy, because I was always, like I said before, in a rush, the race, you have to get this done, you have to get here. But even with my daughter, I also learned in the school is great because it's your own pace. Some children don't even speak English when they come here, and everything takes time. I think when you learn that, it's easier for you to adapt to things.
I agree. I think when I moved to Doha, so I've also lived in a few countries. I moved from Egypt to Doha, and I found that I made friends very quickly. And I think the thing about living in somewhere like Doha is that pretty much everyone is a foreigner. Everyone's an expat. So there's plenty of people to connect with. But when I moved to Malaysia, I found it a much slower process making friends because it's not so much of the expats, or everyone already has their friends. Everyone already has their community, so I'm trying to find ways to infiltrate or make friends, and I found the process slower, and I started asking, is there something wrong with me? And like you say, you have to be patient with yourself. You have to practice self-care, and it's a journey.
Exactly.
Making but then do you find that it takes you time to make friends? You said it took you about a year, right? And then by the time you've made your friends and you've got a good kind of flow, then it's time to move again.
Correct. I mean, that's what happened. I mean, like I said, because I was kind of grumpy when I arrived, because I didn't really want to move so far away from home. I wanted to live in the US or stay in the Caribbean, but of course, because of my husband's career, it was a very important move for him, and I had to accept it. And also for my daughter, good school, good country. I was a bit grumpy, but I think it takes time, and to talk with other people in similar situation. They said we all went through the same thing. And then I joined the gym. I was doing meditation. I mean, you have to find your own things, but I think it's important self-care. But also to be patient, not to put pressure on yourself. I used to put a lot of pressure on myself before. Like by this, I have to get things done. And now I realize if they don't get done, of course, things that are not 100% important. But just relax. Do
you ever feel lonely?
I do, but not. I did the first year, not anymore. And again, it's because the first year I was grumpy. When you're grumpy, it's very hard to
it's a mindset, right?
to make friends, because I did have some very strange experiences with people that is the frequency, right? When you're a low frequency, you find people that are not so nice. So the first year was lonely, but after that, you have to get out, to reach out, and then I started, go to meetings. Even now, I organize the coffees in the school.
Nice.
I'm doing the dance group. So and then with these ladies, they are amazing. This a group of Mexican ladies.
So when you first came to Malaysia, you did have that sense of loneliness, but you really embraced. It almost sounds like you created like a challenge for yourself. Like, I must stop feeling grumpy. I must find people. I must find activities and communities that I can integrate into. And now, do you feel like Malaysia? I mean, I think you said it earlier, but Malaysia feels more like a home now.
Yes, 100%. I mean, again, in life, I learned that you have to accept things at some point. I didn't want to move to Malaysia, but there was nothing wrong with Malaysia, right? But good opportunity for my husband, good school for my daughter, good country. But it just took time. I think you have to respect the times, and that's what people don't do. I mean, they want things to be immediate. But it was the first time I was confronted with taking time to feel less grumpy. I mean,
I can relate to that.
It took me a year to feel better and to feel that I wanted to do things. And I can commit to things. But I think it was important to rest for a year. And a lot of people told me, you need to rest because you've been working so hard, traveling so much. It was very challenging, these moves. And in the last, especially because of COVID, but people told me, take it easy, and it was hard for me to take it easy. But then you just have to drop it and say, okay, I'm going to relax. Later on.
No, I can totally relate to that. And it makes sense, actually. And I think that's a really good piece of advice for people that are thinking of moving abroad, or maybe somebody's in that right now. Maybe somebody is living abroad right now and they're feeling that sense of loneliness, right? And, I think it's great that maybe we can help reassure anybody who's out there going through that it does pass, and you have to be patient with yourself. You have to give yourself the time to, to adjust and to learn and to discover and explore and kind of find out who you are within the context of this new culture, this new 100%. Country.
I would say, some people, I would say a year, but I think 6 months to a year, you have to give yourself time.
Agree.
Because that's what happens. I think with a new job, with so many things in life, it takes time to settle.
100%, yeah. So if anyone out there is going through this, if you're feeling a little bit lonely, let us know. Put it in the comment box or somewhere in the comments, and share with us. But it does take time. I can totally agree with that. And you have to be gracious with yourself. And you know, there are going to be days where you feel more lonely than other days. And I think also another thing that can contribute to feeling lonely, and I don't know if you feel the same, is if you miss important events back home.
Yes, I mean, it's kind of sad, but I don't miss them anymore.
Yeah.
Because I kind of learn. I mean, what I do is when I go there, I celebrate them.
Yes.
You know, in a way. I mean, we get together, you know, it's okay. We always say with our friends, okay, let's celebrate the birthdays.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's kind of sad. My niece got married. I was not there. My nephew's daughter was born. I was not there. You know, it's kind of sad, but I think I learned to live with that. But something that I wanted to mention is that I'm watching a lot of Latin American shows that I have never seen before in my life.
Okay. So that's helping you stay connected.
I mean, to some extent, yes, it's kind of funny. But before I would have thought, oh no, I don't like the shows. They're you know, soap operas. They're dramatic. But now I feel like they make me laugh. They remember me,
and they help you feel connected.
Yes, they
it's
do.
something I do.
Yes,
I still watch. There's a British TV show, and some of you may know this. It's called EastEnders, and it's the one thing that I watch from back home that helps me to feel like I'm still connected to like home, like British culture. And EastEnders is not culture, by the way. It's not culture.
Like a soap opera.
But it's something that I've watched my entire life since I was a child, and it's that one little ritual thing that I do, you know, where I catch up on the UK TV, and it helps me to feel like I'm still a little bit connected to home. And I think it's those small things, like watching your Ecuadorian TV shows, that helps you still have that sense of connecting to your culture, to your roots.
100%. I also watch the news. I mean, sometimes it makes me depressed. It's all bad, but I feel like what's going on. But something that I wanted to mention that it's important is that I think it's very important that this is what I do. When I feel lonely or depressed or nostalgic, which has happened a lot lately, I look at my life and I said, everything in life has pros and cons. You know, if you stay back at home, maybe you are with your family, you know, in your own environment, you're comfortable, but then you will be thinking, oh, I wish I traveled more. A lot of people that I meet, they say, oh, I wish I traveled as much as you, and I kind of complain. I said, oh, I'm tired of traveling. But there's really, you know, we are lucky and privileged to be able to have travel. My daughter also, you know, I always tell her, there's a very good, you know, positive side to this.
Travel 100% is a privilege.
Yes. It opens your mind, it opens your life. So I think you really have to be appreciative of that. And when I get down and lonely, I always think of that.
Absolutely. That's such an important thing to remember. You know, we are incredibly privileged that we get to travel the world, that, you know, the communities that we live in embrace us.
Yes,
right?
Correct.
You know, this is such a privilege, and I will never take it for granted. You know, and I don't know about you, but every day I still have these pinch me moments.
Yes, where I am.
Yeah, like pinch me. I'm in Malaysia.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
you know, I was lying on my sofa last night, and the Twin Towers were lit up in the colours of the flag, and I have a pinch. Like, oh my God, like this is my view. This is my life.
Yes,
you know, and
it's beautiful. Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right. Like, it's a privilege to have the lifestyle that we've had. I would like to preface by saying, however, that having this lifestyle, people always say to me, oh, you're so lucky. And my response to that is, it's not luck. It's a series of choices that I made. Yeah. It's hard work.
Yes, it is.
And it's sacrifice.
It is.
Sacrificing time with family and friends, sacrificing those big life moments like weddings, birthdays, celebrations. You know, it's a lot of sacrifice and it's hard work, but it's a series of choices that have led us to where we are, right? It's not luck.
And I think, you know, it's very interesting because I consider myself, I mean, like you said, of course, lucky, but to be honest, I have worked very hard to get where I am.
Yes.
Because, you know, when I went to Kenya, it was very difficult, but I didn't give up. You know, a lot of times that I've been doing some things and I feel lonely. I mean, I remember I was working in Swaziland and I had panic attacks.
Yeah.
I was calling my sister and I was like, oh, I feel horrible. And, you know, I have experienced, you know, difficult moments in my life. And, you know, like, and I was alone. And then it makes you build resilience.
Correct,
I mean,
yes.
it does over time. But like I said, when people say how lucky you are, I said like the iceberg, right? You don't know all the work below.
And below the surface.
Exactly. I mean, it's not so easy. I mean, like you said, it's a choice, but again, with the good and the bad things. But I think, of course, you become more resilient, but a lot of sacrifice. And of course, sometimes I feel like I'm sad. I mean, like I said before, I don't miss them so much anymore because it's part of my life.
Yeah, you get used
to
it.
I do get to, like it was hard for me not to be able to go to my niece's wedding. Some things like that. I'm like, that day I tried to do something else, not to think about it so much. Or my mom's birthday is coming up. I cannot be there. She's getting old. Of course it's hard, but again, that day I try to distract myself doing something else.
I do think that everything is a balance, right? Like you say, the pros and cons.
Yeah.
For me, up until this point, the pros have outweighed the cons.
Yes.
But who knows? I think that can change. I think we were talking earlier, right, before we started recording about, as you get older, your priorities change.
Yes.
And so maybe as you get older, for me certainly it becomes a little bit more difficult being away from home.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But definitely the pros, like I can just jump on a flight and be in Thailand in an hour.
Yeah.
And I will never take that for granted,
That's true, but I always think that, you can always go back.
True. Home will always be there.
Or I can always go back to Ecuador. I mean, I'm thinking when my daughter goes to university, I'm sure I'm going to be close to her because that's what every mom has told me. If she's in Europe, Australia, or the US, I'm going to be close to her. But I always think I can always go back to Ecuador and live there 6 months, later on in life. So I think at some point, you have to enjoy what you have right now.
Yes.
And later on, it will always be an option
Home
to
will
go
always
back.
be there.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we're lucky to say that, but I think we can always go back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, if anybody out there is thinking of moving or is going through a little bit of loneliness right now, I really hope that this chat could help some people feel a bit less lonely and a little bit more connected and understand that there are plenty of people out there that are going through the same thing or have been through the same thing. Yeah. Nathalie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's been so lovely chatting to you. We've never met before,
No, exactly.
But I feel like we could probably sit and chat for another hour.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
No,
who knows? Maybe we'll do a part 2 and a follow-up.
Yeah.
But I really want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to be on the podcast with me today. And if anybody has any questions or any comments, please pop them in somewhere on a comment box somewhere. And stay tuned for the next episode of She's Far From Home.
Thank you so much, Katie, for inviting me. And I think it's very important to discuss the things. If you feel bad or something, reach out. There's a lot of options out there. And, all of us feel the same way at some point in life. So I think it's important to support each other and do things like this too.
Absolutely. To get the conversation going.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nathalie. Hug.
Yeah.
Thank you.